Good morning and welcome to a Radical Hospitality Podcast. My name is Zeke Freeman. I'm the owner of Root Architecture and Development. We have been on a unique experience as we're developing our own hotel and have been in these conversations with experts in the industry and are just recording those conversations as we work our way through our project. So this is a kind of an open, raw, real conversation with one of my mentors and coaches from Vodacy. We have a really special guest. Shawn is the founder and CEO of Vodacy. He's been in this industry for over 22 years. He's coaching thousands of guys like myself. And so I asked him to come in and just have a chat about what they're doing at Vodacy related to vacation rentals and how that relates to kind of the scalability of these cluster vacation rentals and boutique hotels that we're doing. So appreciate you hopping on, Shawn. Good to see you. Welcome.
Absolutely. Thanks, Zeke. I always, like before we hit record, I told you how much I love these types of conversations. It's been so fun to watch your guys' journey from, building the treehouse and developing that and rolling into what you're rolling into now with the hotel and everything that you guys are doing. It's really exciting to watch and really excited about this conversation today.
Great. I appreciate it. I appreciate all your help for getting us to where we're at today and kind of next steps. So, what I wanted to kind of maybe start with is just, we actually met up a couple months ago at the short-term rental wealth conference, and there was a section in there on boutique hotels. Had a chance to meet with you afterwards, and I know you've had some involvement with Michael Sojourn and their boutique hotel space. What I'd like to kind of hear is you guys really hammer in on creating these unique experiences in vacation rentals. How have you seen that influencing boutique hotels create exceptional experiences that aren't just your hotel standard stay?
Yeah. One, it really is the foundational piece to hospitality at this stage in the game. Always really has been, right? It always, at the end of the day, hospitality is about a great experience. It is about a unique experience. When short-term rentals exploded onto the scene and really just added fuel to the fire post-COVID, and everybody was wanting to get away, the reason is because they wanted a different experience than hotels. And really, they were kind of forced into that experience because a lot of hotels were shut down, right? There was a lot of hotels in the hospitality space that were like, hey, we got to have all the social distancing and everything else, and the product just didn't work. And so it gave this wide open door for short-term rentals to come in. And as the dust has settled, as it always does in any industry, and short-term rentals is no different, now we're getting kind of back down to normal. What does the consumer really want? In the short-term rental space, it is a unique experience. Now, just having a short-term rental, having one during COVID was like having toilet paper during COVID. You made money. Everybody looked like a genius, right? Everybody looked like they knew what they were doing in the short-term rental game. We're finding, and I've been doing this, my first short-term rental was in 2006, so well before COVID, right? And we had to kind of figure this game out along the way when it wasn't really mainstream. And the way that we were able to attract customers back then is the same way we're doing it now. We had to have something unique, and we had to give them this great, amazing experience so that they would choose us over all the other options out there, which at the time, most of the options were hotels, right? And the bigger hotels. Now we're starting to say, okay, the hospitality industry really is the experience industry. That's what we're in. The sooner you can realize that, the faster you're going to rise to the top and have success. The gap between the middle of the market and the bottom of the market and the top of the market, that gap between the top of the market and the middle is just continues to widen and widen and widen. And I wish it wouldn't, because what that's telling us is there's not enough people adopting that they have to create and deliver a great, unique experience. The ones that do are succeeding, and they're making more money, and they're getting their unfair share of business. It's what we talk about nonstop. Now, talking about it is a lot easier than executing on it. And then rolling that now into like the boutique experiences that you're talking about, like with the boutique hotels, you're able to start to take these little hotels and give them these themes and these stories and create these experiences. And I think for guys like you and like the Michaels of the world that are rolling from short-term rentals into that world, it's the exact same concept, right? It's saying, okay, how can we create this great little experience that is unique, it's localized, it's really fun, it's directed at a specific target audience, and they can come in, and when somebody takes a week off, they've got this great experience, and it's very, very attractive to the consumer. When you solve a problem, which is creating a better experience than somebody else, you're going to get paid for that. That's where I think the transition is just understanding the fundamental aspect of hospitality, which is a unique experience. The boutique hotels give you that ability to offer that. Now, all boutique hotels don't work just like all short-term rentals don't work. It's the ones that really dial that in. I know, I'm curious, and probably just watching you guys from the sidelines a little bit about what you're doing. It's a very unique experience with the treehouse concept and everything, right? I mean, there's a very congruent story that we're telling. And that's what a lot of the guys that are operating at a high level in the boutique hotels, the cluster type properties, that's what they're doing really well.
So I'm curious, out of Vodacy, boutique hotels kind of lives, I'd say between hotels and vacation rentals. Boutique hotels seems to be a lot of the conversation, but there's also kind of these more unique properties that are kind of cluster properties, like you mentioned, tree houses that don't necessarily fit into that. There's clusters of lake cabins. You might have a beautiful ranch, but then also have like an ADU or an accessory structure that you could add a couple of additional rentals to make your vacation rental that's already operating more. Have you seen many of the Vodacy group adapting or adding additional units to increase profitability, and what are some of those projects?
Yeah, absolutely. So one, we've got a number of members in the boutique hotel space, right? Finding these older hotels, rural type areas. They're old, they're run down, they need a facelift, but they have all the elements to create this unique experience. Then you start to go to some, like you mentioned, like treehouse clusters, and then you do the glamping situation, and you see some of the tiny home type situations. Now, you don't see as many people adapt to that for one main reason, I believe. Not because it's not a very high cash flowing type of a situation. It's a very desirable stay, a very desirable, unique experience. The people are like, the customers want that, right? They will go stay. You will make money doing that. However, there's a couple drawbacks to that, depending on the type of unit that you're investing in. Some of them, like some of the ADUs, tiny homes, glamping situations, teepees. We've got one member who has a property outside of Yellowstone, and it's all teepees, right? And they do really well from a cash flow perspective. However, it's a fairly large upfront cash influx. Like you have to have, because you can't finance any of that stuff, right? You're coming out of pocket to buy all your teepees. You're coming out of pocket to build all the building pads, right? A bank's not going to give you a loan. It's not a home, right? It's not something that's going to be resellable. And even on the tiny homes, they're not built on a foundation typically. And so you're coming in, you're either getting like an RV type of a loan or you're paying cash for it. They can be really good cash on cash returns on that, but the cash outflow, if I'm an investor and the money I have to put out, even though the overall dollar amount, I might be able to buy a home for example, a cabin for $500,000, and I might be able to have this land for $100,000 and put me a tiny home on it for $100,000, and my cash flow is about the same. My overall into that property is less, but I've got to come up with all $200,000 on that first one. The other thing is you have to think about, and I think it's important for investors to think about, when you start to get into those unique type of properties that are not financeable, they also don't appreciate as much. You've also got that long-term appreciation that you're going to give up a little bit on, because they're going to depreciate typically, right? They're going to, like those teepees are only going to last X amount of years, right? Yurts are only going to last a certain amount of years. And so it's not like a standalone home that's going to appreciate. And that can be a big deal for somebody's long-term goals. So those are a couple of things I think that keep people out of it. There's also such a demand for it and a really good cash flow position. And sometimes people are like, hey, I'm looking more for that immediate cash flow, and it could be a really good move.
Yeah, I kind of wonder, and have seen kind of combination where, maybe you're buying like a larger ranch house or something that has, financeability, but maybe you can supplement and add some cash flow to that by, adding in a tree house or a glamping or something like that. So you kind of get, kind of a combination of those, a financeable plus some additional assets. Part of what we found is difficult is a lot of the entitlements that come along with some of this is, finding areas that won't allow it, or if they do allow it, the process that you have to take it through to entitle to be able to do that.
It's really attractive to find those properties that kind of hit both of them, right? You got these hybrid properties with acreage, you've got the space, you've got a standalone home, you've got the land, like we said, and then like you said, and it's sometimes you have to have that trifecta. Not sometimes, you always have to have that third piece of them allowing you to put ADUs and tiny homes on them, or whatever you want to do to add some additional cash flow to that property. If you can hit all those nails on the head, it can be a really good option and a really good road to run down. And we've got a number of people that we work with at Vodacy that do that. Like I was just talking to somebody yesterday. They have a property in the middle of Kentucky on the Bourbon Trail. I think it's on around 8 to 10 acres and really nice cabin on it. And they started putting these tiny homes on it. And the tiny homes are making almost as much as the cabin is. And with 10 acres, they can spread them out enough that everybody's not on top of each other. And so it works out really well. And they just supplemented, almost doubled their cash flow on this particular property by doing that. And they still have the 10 acres with a really solid home on it. They were able to get financing on all that stuff. It can work out really well if you get that hybrid
cabins approach. Are a good approach. I mean, I think I would gear our clients away from yurts and tents and those kind of things. as you mentioned, just the, the appreciability. But cabins, are hard structures. They can weather the snow. They can, you can still come in and charge a premium from RV and yurt sites, and they're a long-term asset. The other piece that goes in a lot of these sites is infrastructure.
Yeah.
They're not as inexpensive as most people would think to just.
Exactly. That's the thing. It's like, hey, I can buy that tiny home for 60 or 70 grand or 100 grand or whatever it ends up being. And they don't realize, well, it's going to cost you 30 or 40 grand to get your sewer and water and electric, because most of the time you're doing septic. Next, you got to run your power and water. And before you know it, you can be into that pretty more than most people usually anticipate.
We're doing a set of 9 cabins, 9 RV sites, and then 9 treat houses. So kind of a 27 units, $250,000 for the septic and infrastructure. And then we had to bring in, 500 loads of gravel and infill to level out the site. So a lot of infrastructures that can go into that. But, it's going to be a $2-3 million project, 18 units. You could easily spend $2 or $3 million on a really high-end vacation rental home as well. So it trades off.
Hey, if you're liking this interview so far, we would love for you to share this with your friends. And please leave a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to. This really helps us out a ton. It helps other people like you find out about it as well. Now back to the episode.
Going back to what you guys are doing, right? You've got a mix of products there, right? You got some RV pads, we've got the cabins on there, we've got the tree houses on there. I mean, you got a bit of a mix of product that can kind of diversify, but it's all very congruent. That's, I think, what's important too when you do clusters. Don't be everything to everybody. Have it very congruent throughout, where that experience stays fairly much the same for the same target audience, and that's the ones I see succeed the most.
And that's something on a cluster development like that. Do you think it is better to create like one unique experience that is then congruent across the cluster, or try to do different themed cabins, different themed boutique rooms? Like, where do you think the uniqueness versus creating just one exceptional experience?
You can have them, and I think it works really well to have different themes. Different themes have to roll up to one congruent overarching theme. For example, fire, wind, water, all those different things. Or maybe it's the area resort. You've got a spring area, you've got a summer area, you've got a fall room. Like, we do that with our cabins a lot. Like, that's a very common thing we do with our cabins in the mountains. Is like, I've got a cabin I call the Lakeside Treehouse. Everything in there is kind of all these adult type tree houses that are surrounded by trees as far as our artwork and everything. The house itself is on stilts overlooking a lake. And you're kind of up in the canopy of the trees. So you feel like this treehouse feel. But every bedroom, it's kind of the same but different, because one's a winter room, one's a summer room, one's a fall room, one's a spring room. You try to make them different where everybody has kind of a unique experience. I think where you fall flat is when you can't tie it all together. If you're having a hard time tying all the themes together for some reason, I feel like it's going to just feel like you're throwing mud at the wall and we'll see what sticks, right? I feel like you have to be able to tie the unique rooms or the unique cabins or the unique areas of resort. I've seen this in bigger resorts, like larger resorts, where like one area is based on the ocean, one area is based on the mountains, one area is because like there's like in Hawaii, I'm thinking of a Marriott that we go to, and there's a mountainside views, right? And everything in there is like the Hawaii mountainside. And then the other one's overlooking the ocean. Everything in there, the design is of the ocean, but it all goes back to, I mean, it's all very localized and ties back into that local area. I think you can be unique, and I think it works to be unique. Individual either areas of a resort, maybe the cabins are all one specific thing, but I've seen them where each room is actually very, very specific to like really themed, like very themed rooms. We got one place here in Utah called the Alaskan Inn, and it's a boutique hotel setup. Every room is very, very unique as far as its own, but they don't have in the Alaskan Inn, like it's called the Alaskan Inn, they'll have one room with the Northern Lights. They'll have one room with polar bears. They'll have one room with grizzlies. They'll have one room with salmon, and then one room with moose, right? So everything still ties up to Alaska. Yeah. They don't have palm trees at the Alaskan Inn, right? They don't have that room, right? And so I think that it's important you can be very unique, but you got to tie up to an overarching thing.
So platforms and scalability, what do you think, what are some of the things that would scale well? Like if you're already doing some vacation rentals in terms of team members and management, when does it start to break when you go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 10 units? Where do you think the transition is?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And this is one that we wrestle with a lot. And we have a lot of members that like myself, my portfolio is spread out all across the country. I don't have any, I don't know that I have any properties within 7 or 8 hours of each other. I have a hard time getting one person to be able to manage it. I think that you could have a hospitality manager that can be kind of the overarching manager of whoever the boots on the ground is, right? If you're in that situation. But there's economies of scale. And so when you scale, you can save money. You start to, we have one, like in my situation, I'm paying 30% on every single one of my properties because I have a separate team on every property. The only real person that I could scale outside of technology is like maybe the hospitality manager that's managing all the other managers. Let's say we have one of our members, one of our highest producing members makes a lot more money than I make actually, which I'm really proud of. They're making well over 7 figures on their portfolio. I don't make 7 figures on mine. I've been close a couple times. I need to hit that mark. I've never cracked the 7-figure mark as far as net cash flow, but they're making well over 7 figures net cash flow. But they did it because they went and they decided to buy clusters of homes in one area. They have one manager. They have a cleaning crew that was able to handle their whole portfolio. They've got their maintenance person that can handle their whole portfolio. And so they keep those people busy. Their overall expenses on the management side is around 15 to 16% every year. Well, that's half of what I pay. That's a big deal to the bottom line, right? Especially when you're talking about those kinds of numbers. So those are things that why it's attractive to build clusters in areas, right? Why it's attractive to have, because you can, instead of in my situation where I have to go find a team in every single area for one house, that means I've got to find people that have scale somewhere else, right? They have a portfolio of other properties they're managing, because it's just inefficient if they're trying to just make money on my one house. And it's inefficient for me to go try to do that. When you buy these clusters or you decide to stay regionally, now all of a sudden that team is a very valuable asset and saves you some significant money as you start to build, especially as you start to build and scale. Because if my average expenses on management are 30% and their average expenses are on management on $1 million portfolio, let's just say it's $1 million top line gross revenue, right? Which it's much more than that. Theirs is probably closer to $2.5 million top line. That's an extra $300,000, $400,000 in their pocket every single year by having that strategy versus my strategy.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
And then I guess that, the other, attractive thing on heading more towards the commercial type properties is the value that you can get with cap rate by performance. That seems to be one of the things with short-term rentals that you're creating, a lot of value in cash flow, but you may not, be able to capitalize that. The adjacent neighbors aren't, appreciating as much as what you're doing. I'm interested on like this idea with some cluster homes. Like, at what point does it become commercial where you can start to take advantage of that versus, still staying in that single family realm?
It's a really good question, a really good topic. On the single family side, individual homes they're going to be very, very ever difficult to ever value them based on net operating income, cap rates, and sell on that basis. Like an investor would come in and look at it that way. I get contacted because of what we do and how long we've been doing it by private equity firms on a regular basis, at least once or twice a month. Private equity firms will call us up, and what they're looking for are either the cluster type properties that you're building, like a resort type of a situation, boutique hotels, or a regionally clustered short-term rental portfolio that has like that, like I said, the management in place, the teams in place, because they don't just want the homes, they want the whole thing, right? They want the system. And it only really works if it's a cluster of properties in localized cluster or regional cluster that's fairly tight. That's what, and I say that because I have these conversations with those buyers that are looking for that type of a product. And then they will look at it and evaluate it based on the performance, not as much based on the property value itself. Us as individual investors on the single family side, I would say there's not a lot of value. And when you're a buyer, don't place a lot of value on the business assets because you're paying for something that you could very easily go recreate. That's why there's not a lot of value there. You can go redo that really easy on 1 or 2 properties. my management partner works for a lot of different homeowners and investors. So if I buy that property, I can just call them up and have them do the same thing. I could copy and recreate and reverse engineer what I'm doing on the unique experience side and go do that. And so we're relying on the appreciation of the real estate itself. Right? When a property is valued, it's going to be valued by a residential appraiser. They're going to care almost zero about how much money this property is making, right? Because, and probably rightfully so, because they're saying, well, as soon as Shawn sells it, he's not managing it anymore. He's not putting together this unique experience, anything else. I don't know how Joe's going to do over here, or he might do better. He might do worse. We don't know. So we're just looking at property values. There is an advantage. And I do think that the market wants to see these turn into more commercial assets. I think it's a long time coming before that actually happens on the single family short-term rental side. Now, that opinion is maybe a little different than other guys in the short-term rental industry, and maybe they're smarter than I am, but I just don't see that ever happening very soon on single family homes. Right. I think that it's going to be difficult to value them as commercial properties, on the cap rate side. When you start to get into clusters and you start to get into boutique hotels, you're exactly right. Now you're starting to say, okay, I can come in and I can add some value. I can get this property operating. And I kind of gave myself that forced appreciation because I'm a good operator, right? That's the attractive side of running into more of the commercial type of properties, right? There's a lot of people that they're attracted to that because, and rightfully so, that's a really good thing. It's like, hey, I can pull my own levers and I get rewarded for that on the back end because there's investors that are buying at certain cap rates. And if I can perform at a certain level, I times that cap rate. Now I gave that forced appreciation. I think that there's going to be not a disconnect, but I just don't think that there's people who think that that's going to happen in the short-term rental game, single family homes, short-term rentals sooner than I think it will. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon because logistically, I just can't figure out how an investor is going to look at it that way. I think you're exactly right though. And I think it's probably why you get attracted to moving to the clusters and the commercial type properties and the boutique hotels, because we kind of control our own fate, right? Control our own destiny with how that property performs and what the value on the back end ends.
I mean, it's definitely less passive. What I've really enjoyed about the treehouse is, we kind of took your advice and we hired property management, and, that has been very much, hand that over and they've operated it and they put a check in our bank account. That's been great. As we've pushed into the boutique hotel space, we thought we would work with a property manager to maybe manage this thing. The deeper we got into it, the more we realized, this really requires building up a team, building up a business, and maybe you get the systems in place and you can be a little bit more passive, but you've got to have, guys on the ground, boots that, are really focused on running a well-operated business first, which is how I would treat any of our businesses.
I would totally agree. I always say there's pros and cons to every decision, every road you run down, right? That is one of the drawbacks, is if you don't have the time or the skill set, right? You might have the time, but if you've never built a team and you've never built and put together, and run a business and hired employees and managed them and everything else, that's a component that there's going to be a learning curve there. You're actually trying to build a business now, right? It will be valued as a business, but you're going to be rewarded or not rewarded based on how well you were able to put that business together.
Yeah. Which you're excited about. I don't think if it's something we weren't interested in, we wouldn't be going into. And we've got a team that, particularly one of our team members wants to take on that GM role. She's got well experience in that. And we've hired a hotel consultant to come in during the launch period to make sure that we're setting up systems right. So I think long-term, that'll be a good investment. But it's definitely something we would not be doing on a smaller scale and even this is considered relatively small, like a 20 unit, but it's something I think that could be scalable and be offered to, solve other solutions, other clients' boutique hotels.
And you guys run a business now, right? Business is business, right? Hiring employees and understanding how to payrolls and taxes and all that different stuff. You guys are doing that. So you understand that. Like there's a lot of people, I think, that get really attracted to certain asset classes and they don't think it all the way through of what all the skill sets you need to have and stack. And we're always learning. We're always trying to figure it out. All of us, none of us have it figured out, right? We're always trying to surround ourselves with people that are a few steps ahead of us in the game. That's why we hire mentors. That's why we have these conversations. At the end of the day, sometimes you got to be realistic about your skill sets of what you have.
And I'm curious. We did the treehouse, and then we started working on, this boutique hotel, a couple of other clients' hotels. We've got another one in the DR that we're kind of invested in. But really the last year has been focused on, this commercial asset. in some ways, I think we've been able to utilize our skills as architects to add value, create value. And it's just been a learning school to go through, and you kind of don't know what you don't know until you get in it, but much more difficult than we would have imagined. But it's also like, okay, we're grinding, we're making progress every month. We've gotten entitlements on the project. We've raised capital to do the project. We're put together a syndication, legal agreements. And it's just, taking a step by time. Gone through SBA lending, which has been basically pull down your shorts and show them everything you got.
Yeah. I've seen those requirements. Yeah, we've done that before.
And so, to me, it's like, okay, it's been something we've been able to figure out, and it seems like it's going to work. And we've kind of been quiet on hopping back into the short term, the single family assets. But part of me has also looked at, we deal with a lot of clients that were building new construction, and it's a difficult couple years, honestly. Like, we had a good climb in vacation rental revenues, but now, construction costs is super high. Interest rates are super high. And it does seem, and better than me, like there is a lot of saturation in the market, So I wouldn't call this easy, but it's an opportunity that is working. Do you see, are people struggling enough in this single family vacation rental, or is that still clicking and working? Are people looking at different assets, like, going larger and multi-units and that sort of thing to make things pencil and work? Where do you see the tides kind of sitting right now?
Yeah, no. And I think it is absolutely difficult, more difficult than it was, right? I think that there's so many people that jumped into the game in an environment that was never going to last. And I don't think that they realized that was the case. And it's kind of what I alluded to in the very beginning of this conversation, is that gap between the middle of the market and the top of the market is widening really, really fast, because fewer and fewer people are latching on to the fact that it's not the market that is the problem. It's how they're running this business that's the problem, right? They don't have the fundamentals in place. Saturation, in my opinion, is a very good thing. If you look at total dollars being spent in the short-term rental game, it just continues to blow your mind and go up. You're like, how is this continuing to go up every year? So the consumer is spending more and more and more money in this space, on these, because they love the experiences of it. They love coming in and using short-term rentals versus, now it's a mainstream option, right? And a lot of people prefer it. And so the dollars being spent are bigger than they've ever been, way bigger than they were during the COVID peak, right? And the total dollars being spent by the consumer. So if that's the case, why do we have so many people struggling? And why do we have so many people saying the market has shifted? It's because their fair share of business got less, right? Their piece of the pie got smaller because there's so many more properties to choose from. Well, when there's more properties to choose from, if you don't do something better and give the consumer a reason to pick your property above and beyond everybody else's, you're going to get your fair share of business. And in today's environment with high interest rates and high prices, your fair share of business is not going to pay the bills. The problem that we have is that not enough people are looking in the mirror and saying, what are the fundamentals that I'm missing to operate toward the top of the market? And I think that's where the short-term rental game is, and it's going to be for a long time. Any mature industry, that's how it works. And any mainstream industry, that's how it works. The top 20% of the businesses in that industry make 80% of the money. And it just is what it is. I mean, it's across the board. It's a tried and true principle that's been talked about for years and years and years, because anything that's mainstream, that's what happens. And so now that we're mainstream, if you were just riding the wave and you're saying, okay, I'm going to go ride the wave in boutique hotels or commercial space or something there, you're going to have the same problem. You have competition, right? There's people that are going to compete against you, and it's not ever going to be easy. You just said it's not easier. There's a lot of learning things. It becomes hard. But if you dial in those fundamentals, you're going to have the success. But I think that fewer and fewer people are looking in the mirror and saying, what can I do different? What am I doing wrong? Instead, they're looking and saying, well, if I go on Facebook and I go on Bigger Pockets and I go on any forum I talk about, they're saying the market's changed, it's oversaturated, the short-term rental game's over. And to me, that's fine. I mean, if they want to talk about that, that's great, right? But I don't think that the saturation is ever going to change. I think the inventory levels are going to remain at really high levels, because I think some people will get out and more people will get in. I think it's going to stay very mainstream for a long time. So you got to figure out how to operate the top.
One of the things I love about the way you teach is just this idea of like focusing in on excellence and the fundamentals. I've experienced that with our architecture business of jumping in and thinking scale was going to solve problems. And, early on we scaled quickly and I was like, wow, that didn't get any easier. It was just more problems. Let's
Yep.
shrink that back down and figure out how to do that well before we scale it. And so we kind of have ridden that wave a little bit of, hey, let's push back, become excellent. And then when it works, let's go bigger. Let's not go bigger to solve a problem because you're just escalating problems otherwise. Had we not had so much, honestly, success in like this little treehouse, I know I couldn't have got my wife on board. That was kind of the pinnacle of, hey, this is working. Let's go do a few more of these and just personally and having some confidence of success of like, okay, this is working at this scale. It's the same market. It's the same clientele. It's guys coming to, go to a Red Rocks concert. So we know it's there. It's unique, right outside of Denver. And let's plug into another unique market that's even closer to that and grow that a little bit. So, for us, it's going from one tree house to, 20. They're just clustered together.
Exactly.
But, it's not quite as simple as that. There's complexity and there's been a lot of learning. So we're excited to step into that. If you had other members in Vodacy that were looking to scale, who would you recommend doing something like this to? And who would you say run the other way? Like when is the right time to scale this?
Yeah, man, it's a great question. One, I think you always got to be thinking about scaling. Scaling means building your portfolio. I think then the question is, okay, what are the ultimate property goals? For me, my ultimate property goals is I wanted really great assets, quality areas all across the country so I could use them. If that's my property goal, and that was somebody who I was talking to, I'd say then probably let's don't worry about going and trying to get pods of properties or boutique hotels or things like that, right? On the flip side, if you have somebody that's doing a really good job with, and one, I would say that, the fundamentals of being able to create a unique experience, put that experience together, deliver that experience, and articulate that experience, then I would say you're ready to start thinking about how can I apply those skill sets to another asset class or a bigger asset class that can allow me to put more money in, get more money out, right? But more money, more guests, more units also means if you're not doing those fundamentals well, you're going to have a lot more problems, right? It just means it's going to magnify the problems instead of fix the problem, like you mentioned, when you start to scale. So the advice would be when somebody is interested in going that direction, I would first look and say, have you figured out the fundamentals? Do you understand the fundamentals? In your guys' case with the treehouse, right? Very successful property, a really dialed in experience. You're articulating it really well to the consumer. And we're saying, okay, now we're going to add a little fuel to the fire and try to figure out how we do this with more than one property. But it also goes back to those property goals. And some people would like to have those pods and get better returns and economies of scale. And I'm going to personally give up on that a little bit because I want my property portfolio to be spread out all over the place and so that I can go use them. And I've got all these unique experiences for me, right? I love using my properties. So if that was somebody's property goal, I would say, well, ignore what everybody else is doing over here on that side because their portfolio doesn't have to look just like yours. It's like, I think sometimes in this world, we have this FOMO. Holy crap. Well, I just heard how great Zeke's doing on his hotel project. And now I want to go do that. Well, that was never in your long-term goals or your long-term property goals of what you were trying to build. And those are the people I would say don't do it. Anybody that is part of their goals, let's say, okay, let's build the skill sets so that we can go do that. Let's go build those fundamental skill sets so that we can go and actually figure out how to do that. Never built a team. Let's go figure out how to do that before we start to do, because we're going to have to do that. So hire some mentors, find somebody that's done it before that can help you on the things that you're lacking. And then the things you're really good at, let's add fuel to the fire. And those are the people I'd say run.
I love it. And Shawn, you've been a great mentor, for us on our journey. So I really appreciate your help in developing, the work that we're doing, taking the time to chat with me today on this. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to connect with you these days?
Yeah, awesome, Zeke. And I appreciate you having me. And it's always so fun to be a part of the journey with so many people. And I appreciate you guys allowing me to be part of this journey with you and see you guys progress and build and everything else. If anybody wants to get a hold of us, they can just go to vodacy.com. It's VODYSSEY.com. And they can find anything they want. We've got free trainings. We've got my book on there. You can download it for free. Lots of different things on how you can get involved in our world. Listen to our podcast. Just lots of ways to get information in this space and move forward straightforward and kind of walk into it with your eyes wide open.
Well, thanks a lot, Shawn. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Zeke.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Radical Hospitality Podcast. If you learned something new or you found this entertaining, please leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you have a project that you're excited about and you're ready to talk to an architect, visit us at therouteteam.com and schedule your free virtual consult with me or one of my team members. That's therouteteam.com.